Have you ever wondered why smart, self-aware people still end up settling in relationships that quietly drain them? It's rarely a lack of love or effort. It's the silent pull of conformity. From a young age, you absorb ideas about what love, success, and partnership should look like. Those lessons shape not only who you choose, but what you tolerate. In this episode, we'll unpack how unspoken societal expectations more than malice teach us to trade authenticity for belonging. By the end, you'll see how to identify which expectations were borrowed and which truly align with you. Let's start with how those quiet scripts take hold. The hidden script, how conformity breeds quiet betrayal. Ever notice how even strong, intelligent people find themselves in relationships that feel strangely hollow? It's not from a lack of insight. More often, it's the weight of invisible expectation scripts absorbed long before we ever agree to them. These unwritten rules about love, success, and identity work like silent contracts. You start following them before you realize they exist, quietly shaping what feels acceptable to want, ask for, or reject. Here's the thing: society rewards predictability more than authenticity. Conformity looks stable, it earns applause, keeps order, checks every box. But inside that approval, something subtle begins to decay. You start editing your words, trimming your needs, bending your time to fit an image that isn't quite yours. At first, it feels harmless, a minor concession for harmony. Over time, though, those concessions pile up until you're performing a version of yourself designed for someone else's comfort. That's where quiet betrayal begins, not from cruelty but compliance. It's the tension between your internal values and the behavior shaped by outside pressure. You start acting against what you truly believe for the sake of belonging. It hums quietly, disguised as maturity or responsibility, but research on conformity shows how quickly social cues can override personal truth. You begin to trade authenticity for acceptance long before realizing the cost. Nowhere is this clearer than in how relationships appear online. The posts are polished, the smiles practiced, the message consistent: success equals harmony and control. Yet research shows a paradox: while couples use these curated moments to boost self-esteem through external approval, excessive social media use correlates with lower life satisfaction. You gain validation but lose contentment. The couple who feels strained starts performing happiness instead of exploring it. They maintain the perfect visual balance while feeling internal imbalance. That's the loneliness of living through a borrowed lens. Think of conformity as following a GPS built on outdated maps. Every turn appears correct, every route familiar, but the destination doesn't match what you intended. You reach the place you were told to go, not the one you chose. What feels like failure is really overdue clarity. On a broader level, psychologists describe institutional betrayal when systems you trust, such as families, workplaces, or authorities, violate or neglect their duty of care. It doesn't have to come from deliberate harm. Betrayal often happens through inaction when support is withheld or silence becomes policy. It's the same pattern, scaled up: misplaced trust, muted voices, and the slow corrosion of belief in your environment and in yourself. So when trust fractures personally or collectively, it rarely starts with malice. It starts when the drive to belong overtakes the need to be genuine. Recognizing that gap is the first step toward repairing it. Because before you can rebuild trust, you have to know which expectations are truly your own. So once the noise of borrowed expectations starts to fade, the real work begins with something simple but revealing: the expectation audit, sorting your genuine needs from the wants you've quietly inherited. This isn't a thought experiment. It's a structured review of the assumptions guiding how you live, love, and make decisions. You're identifying which expectations serve your identity, and which ones subtly ask you to perform a version of yourself that doesn't fit. What if half the expectations you call non-negotiable were never yours to begin with? Think about how many invisible rules shape your choices before you consciously agree to them. An expectation audit helps expose those rules. It's about asking whether the standards you follow support your values or merely echo someone else's voice. When the layers of cultural norms, family messages, and media ideals overlap, they blur your personal compass. Without realizing it, you start prioritizing what earns approval instead of what builds alignment. Often, relationship friction doesn't come from incompatibility but from mismatched assumptions, two people following different invisible playbooks. These assumptions can be about communication, intimacy, or even money. One of the most common arenas for conflict is financial expectation. Who manages the bills, whether saving takes priority over spending, or how debt is handled. These topics feel transactional, yet they carry deep emotional weight. Unspoken money rules often mask power dynamics, security needs, and personal identity beliefs. Including finances in your expectation audit isn't just practical, it's a way to bring hidden emotional contracts into the open. Research shows that explicit negotiation of expectations predicts long-term satisfaction more accurately than compatibility tests ever could. That's because negotiation replaces assumption with clarity. Talking through what you expect around time, affection, finances, family roles creates shared definitions of fairness. When those expectations remain unspoken, disappointment looks like betrayal. Clarifying them turns what feels personal into logistics. It stops invisible tension from becoming emotional debt. Emotional debt builds quietly, like interest. One partner might express care through tasks and consistency, while the other values gestures and verbal warmth. Neither approach is wrong, but when those rules go unspoken, both people start to feel unseen. Over time, that gap compounds unmet needs, growing into quiet resentment. Auditing your expectations helps uncover those hidden accounts before they drain the relationship. Start by asking, which expectations leave you feeling smaller, pressured, or detached from your own voice? Those are often borrowed. They come from external blueprints, not your values, but what you were told would make you enough. True needs, on the other hand, feel grounding. They reinforce your self-respect, your sense of fairness, and your alignment with who you are becoming. That's why the audit matters. It's a recalibration, returning your standards to their original owner. Once those distinctions are visible, clarity replaces confusion. That's when the next step becomes possible, not just understanding what changed, but learning how to turn that awareness into action that rebuilds trust and restores internal alignment. From damage to discipline, rebuilding trust through realignment. After clarity comes the harder part: discipline. Damage can wake you, but rebuilding demands deliberate structure. Once trust fractures, waiting for time to soften the pain isn't enough. Time can dull emotion, but only consistent action restores safety. Realignment starts when you decide that movement forward will be intentional, not reactive. Every breach shakes your relationship with yourself first, and without that recalibration, any attempt to rebuild with someone else stays unstable. Many people rush this phase. They seek closure before comprehension, forgiveness before understanding. The urge to get past it is human, but research warns that moving on too quickly can create betrayal blindness, where you overlook future red flags just to feel secure again. It also sustains low self-esteem, because each time you suppress pain instead of processing it, you confirm the belief that your boundaries don't matter. Slowing down the process may feel uncomfortable, but it protects you from repeating the same injury in disguise. When repair begins, the focus isn't returning to what was, it's consciously designing what will be. That design rests on 3 repair behaviors supported by research: responsibility, reliability, and understanding. Responsibility means owning actions fully, with no deflection or justification. Reliability means demonstrating trustworthiness through consistent, observable behavior, keeping small promises, showing up when you say you will, and aligning words with actions. Understanding is the open communication that makes repair sustainable. Empathy, transparency, and a shared willingness to face difficult truths. Reliability, more than apology, rebuilds safety. The nervous system doesn't respond to words, it responds to patterns. Trust returns when the evidence piles up, not in grand gestures, but in the mundane acts done over and over with integrity. The quiet repetition of dependability signals care louder than a single apology ever could. Institutions follow the same logic. Studies on moral injury in healthcare show that restored trust requires structural transparency, accountability, clear communication, and visibility into decision-making. Personal repair mirrors that. You don't rebuild by concealing the process, you build by showing your work. Transparency becomes architecture. One practical method is keeping a trust ledger. You record small moments of reliability, proof that integrity has returned. This is not about surveillance, it's a reflection tool. Over time, those entries turn abstract hope into tangible progress. You stop wondering if trust is possible and begin to see evidence that it's already forming. Real healing emerges when your standards stop shifting with mood and return to core values. That steadying discipline transforms recovery from emotional reaction into intentional design. Trust becomes less about reassurance and more about structure, something you can build on, not something you chase. And once your standards are stable, a quiet clarity surfaces, the awareness of what truly belongs to you, and what never did. That realization sets the stage for everything that follows. Settling for less isn't a failure of discernment, it's what happens when untested expectations steer your choices. Real connection begins when you stop performing and start aligning relationships with your actual values. Defining and acting on clear expectations isn't just self-awareness, it's the foundation of trust recovery. Each time you clarify mutual standards instead of assuming them, you reduce future vulnerability to betrayal because both sides are doing regular reality checks. This week, audit the expectations guiding your decisions. Identify one belief you borrowed, then rewrite it to reflect who you are now. Growth starts with that single adjustment. Subscribe for more clear, evidence-based tools to align mind, money, and meaning.